Good morning. It's great to see all you guys here. So today Jack and I, for the past week or two, have been going over a couple different verses. And for me, the thing I really got out of it was just trusting in God. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what I felt from that passage. Jack is then going to come up, throw some different points on, and then we'll end the service. I feel like as humans, as people, we kind of have trust issues with everything. Like, people say one thing, we feel like that's maybe right, but we don't want to be for sure. Or even with just God, we still don't always trust that what he's telling us is right, or we worry that what he's saying is what we're supposed to be doing. So from this passage, in the first couple verses, it talks about, give me a second. It's not up. It talks about these couple different people and building a tabernacle, and each person kind of has their own idea of where it's supposed to be, but they still don't exactly always trust that they're doing what they're doing, or they don't always feel like they're the ones, they aren't doing the thing they're supposed to. So it's kind of just seeing what that is, to being able to imply that into our lives, to be able to go out and do what we're supposed to be doing it, whether it be through missions or talking to different people, or if it's just being a teacher in the school, or even if you're just a marine biologist in the ocean, being able to just go out and do what you're supposed to be doing, knowing that, trusting God, and knowing that you're there for a reason and doing what you're supposed to be doing through that. So I'm now going to invite Jack up to give his points.
It's like they put the amateur up here first. He doesn't turn his mic on now. I don't even feel like I need to be up here. How good was that, right? Can we get a hand for all these students? It has been a joy over past year and change to be able to lead our student ministry and to see a lot of these guys grow throughout the year, watch some of these guys graduate and move on to other things. It's been a blessing. So I'm happy that I get a chance to give back. And so for you guys to get to see a little bit of some of the talents of some of our students, some of our life kids, and there is so much more that they do, that they are capable of, that I wish that I could share with you. But best way to do that is, shameless plug, get involved with one of our student ministries, and you get to see it all firsthand. It would be awesome. But today, we are continuing on in our study of Stephen's story. We've been in this chapter of Acts looking at the final words that Stephen said on this earth, and really diving into what does it mean for us? How do we apply that for us today? And as Levi and I have been studying through this passage, and he shared a little bit with you about all the things that he got out of it and how we are called to be trusting God no matter where we are, I'm excited to be able to break down where we got all that stuff from. What is it that sparked that in him? And I hope that you guys get to hear something for yourselves as well. So we are in Acts chapter 7, verses 44 through 50. Not a lot of verses, but a lot of stuff packed in there. So Acts chapter 7, verses 44 through 50. It'll be up on the screen. Would love to have you guys turn and follow along with me as well. Stephen begins one of his last statements that he gives on earth just like this. Our fathers had the tent of witness in the wilderness, just as he spoke to Moses, directed him to make it, according to the pattern that he had seen. Our fathers in turn brought it in with Joshua when they dispossessed the nations that God drove out before our fathers. And so it was until the days of David, who found favor in the sight of God and asked to find a dwelling place for the God of Jacob. But it was Solomon who built a house for him. Yet the Most High does not dwell in houses made by hands. As the prophet says, heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool. What kind of house will you build for me, says the Lord, or what is the place of my rest? Did not my hands make all these things? So Stephen here, he talks about 4 pillar individuals in the community of Israel. He talks about 4 of the greatest leaders of their time. He leaves out quite a few, and these may not be some of the ones that point out to you, but he has, in my opinion, a very specific reason to bring these 4 people up. They were all leaders. 2 of them were kings. Some of them were living in the desert. Some of them got to live in the promised land. But each and every one of them holds something special in moving the presence of God forward with the men and women of Israel. Each one of them plays a special part in what we know as the tabernacle and the temple. Each of them does something different, has their own little part to play. So let's focus on the first 2. Let's begin there first. I'm going to reread these passages first. 44 and 45, it says, "Our fathers had the tent of witness in the wilderness, just as he who spoke to Moses directed him to make it, according to the pattern that he had seen. Our fathers in turn brought it in with Joshua when they dispossessed the nations that God drove out before our fathers." So we got 2 guys. We got Moses, someone you're probably super familiar with hearing about. He parted the Red Sea. He brought the people out of Egypt. He led the people in the desert for 40 years, but he did not get a chance to go into the promised land. He didn't get to make it. Joshua is the next man in line, the one that was right underneath him, his right-hand man, that went in and they took over. They destroyed all the nations in front of them because God laid it out before them that they would do it, and he led them forward. So what do these 2 men have in common? Because Moses brought the law and Joshua brought the land. So what is the common thread? And I think it is this. The Israeli people, they had something in the wilderness and in their time that they were traveling around called, for what we call the tabernacle. For them, it's this very important phrase right in the center there that you could have even just glossed over. It says, the tent of witness. Got the tent of witness. If you want to pull those Greek words up for me. So we've got this phrase right behind me. He skene tu marturiou. Means the tent of witness. But it could also mean the tent of meeting, the tent of testimony. It's got a couple different things in there. And the point of that is it was used in the book of Exodus, this exact phrase, to describe the place where Aaron and the other Levites and people were going to serve their God, and they were going to take care of it, and they were going to keep it as a statute forever so that it would be observed throughout the generations. So this tiny little phrase, the tent of witness, brings about what I believe Stephen is trying to say that his own people missed. This tent of meeting, this tent of witness, this tent of the testimony, however would be best to define it, is the place where the people of Israel were supposed to meet with God in a dynamic way. They were supposed to go to him there. They were supposed to worship with him there. They were supposed to pray with him there. It was supposed to be the center of worship, but it was more than just a location. And so Stephen, just in that tiny phrase, is explaining that you people that I'm talking to, you missed the point. Jesus himself in Matthew chapter 21, verse 13 says, "It is written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you make it a den of robbers." He was quoting Isaiah 56 and Jeremiah 7:11, where he was talking about how you're supposed to be bringing these burnt offerings, all these sacrifices, all this stuff here, because it's meant to be a house of prayer, a place where you remember that you are supposed to be a people set apart. You are supposed to be a people that does all of this differently. That's why you got to come to this place. That's why you can't eat pork. That's why you can't do this, this, and that, and you're supposed to do all these things. This was a place to remind them of those promises, to remind them of who their leader truly was, who their God is. You're supposed to go to the tent of meeting where you can go and meet with God. And the book of Jeremiah, in their own history, he talks about how they screwed it up. That you have forgotten me, that you have forgotten God, that you have done things in a way that you were not supposed to. And so God was going to punish them for it. And it's no different at this point when Stephen is talking to them thousands of years later. When Jesus was talking to them just before that. You don't get the point. And so Stephen brings up the tabernacle to explain to them that they didn't get it. They missed their direction. but it's also something that not only people thousands of years ago forgot about. It's not like all of a sudden we now have this all together. How many of you guys have had something and that came in a box that said those tiny, really time-consuming words called "some assembly required"? It's a huge lie. A lot of assembly is always required. And how many of you have opened up that box, looked inside of it, pulled everything out, kind of laid things out, saw the little thing that called manual, and you're like, I don't need that. Whoop. And then 5 minutes later, been like, okay, where'd that book go? I missed something. I was putting together something not all that long ago, and I got it all together. I spent probably like an hour on this thing, getting everything ready, pushed the power button, pushed a couple more times. What did I do? And I looked inside of it, and I was like, man, if I just read the directions, I would have realized I was supposed to plug the thing in. And so I put the plug in, pushed the power cord, and wouldn't you know, popped right on. It was great, good as new. How often do we do that? How often do we take the one thing that we're supposed to remember and chuck it to the wayside and be like, nah, I got this myself? How many times do we take this book and we think, no, that's not for me. This isn't written about the situation I'm in. This thing that I'm thinking about, that there's no way that could apply to what I'm supposed to be doing right now. There's no way. I don't need it. I got it myself. I got friends. I got people that are going to give me the good advice, that are going to show me the way to go. I can do this myself. It's not a problem. It's okay. I can handle it. I find myself saying that all the time. But Stephen is explaining to them that even these people that you knew as some of the greatest leaders ever, some of the people that you talk about in hallowed, hushed terms in this wonderful place that you call the temple, they worship God in this tiny little primitive tent that could get moved around, that could get thrown about. And you're doing it in this giant, grand structure, but you're still missing the point. So what did Moses and Joshua have that tied them together? I believe that they did something that was simply this. They focused on God. They focused on God. They kept their eyes on the prize. They kept their eye on the ball, They knew where they were supposed to be looking. They kept themselves focused on God, because without him, Moses wouldn't have been able to be directed on how to make the tabernacle. If Joshua wasn't focused on God, they wouldn't have been able to go in and dispossess the nations that God tore out in front of them. It would not have been possible. They focused on God. And it wasn't just in a place that was permanent and proper. It was in a place that was mobile and temporary. And I know those four things, they weren't alliterated, sorry, Coulter, but couldn't think of good ones. Even in a place that was mobile and temporary, they could serve God and they could focus on him properly, and they could know that where they're supposed to be going, what they're supposed to be doing. They could understand the point. And he moves on to the next two verses where he talks about two more men, two more hugely important figures, people that wrote huge sections of the Old Testament. Someone that wrote something that if you open up into the middle of the Bible, you're probably going to land on something that this guy wrote about. We've got David and Solomon. We've got David and Solomon. So let's read this. Verse 46 says, "Who found favor in the sight of God and asked to find a dwelling place for the God of Jacob? But it was Solomon who built a house for him." David found favor in the sight of God. He's like, he's the guy. He's it. He wrote a whole bunch of chapters in this giant book called the Book of Psalms. He wanted to make a house for God. God said no. His son Solomon did it instead. He didn't get a chance to do it. He didn't get to do the thing that was burning inside him, like, I got to find God this home. I have to bring our people into the next thing. He did get to do something, though. He was the one that brought the tabernacle from a place called Shiloh, where it was after Joshua crossed over the river and took over the land of Israel. He moved it from Shiloh to their capital city in Jerusalem, and he was like, okay, we're going to move this temporary thing, we're going to bring it over here, and then, God, I'm going to build you a home. I'm going to do the thing that's right. But he didn't get a chance to do it. It was somebody else. So David and Solomon, they've got something in common other than the fact that they were just kings. They were the men that led Israel. They've got more than that. Just like Moses and Joshua moved forward how God dwelt with his people in the tabernacle, moved it from one place to taking over the land and putting it somewhere permanently instead of moving around. David moved that structure, that tabernacle, from where it was when they first entered, a place that was farther away, to a more central location so more people could come and worship God more fully in Jerusalem. And then Solomon built the grandest structure that the people had ever seen. He built the temple. But it was more than just they did something for God. It was more than just they created this place. God is clearly explaining to them that I'm going to be able to work and do things no matter where I am. I'm going to be able to do this no matter what is happening. So these two men who did two very separate things are setting up what I believe Stephen is trying to get to in saying that all this stuff is going to go away. All of these things, just as permanent as you think that the temple is, it's not. It's just like the tabernacle. It can get set up and torn down just like that. So it may be a permanent place that you're looking to or that you think is the best place known to man, but it's not this proper home that you think it is. So what puts them together? I believe that both David and Solomon wholeheartedly trusted in God. They trusted in him. They knew, God, if you're calling me to do something, I'm going to trust you to do it in the way that you're supposed to do it. Even though I want to build you a home, even though I want to be the guy that creates for you this grand, wonderful place where people are going to come and worship, I trust in you into seeing that maybe my part is just moving it from one place to another. Maybe all I'm supposed to do is build it here instead of where it was before so that more people could meet with you here. I'm going to trust that you have my best interest in mind, even though I'm the king, even though I'm the leader, I'm the guy. David never thought of it that way. He trusted in God, even though he didn't get to build it. He knew that God was setting something else up to allow for this to happen. And Solomon himself, he had to put a lot of trust in God, knowing that he was supposed to build something that he knew the people in Israel were going to look at forever. They were going to look at this place and be like, I got to make this place so grand, so wonderful that when you look at this, you are just floored by how great and grand and wonderful that my God is that's supposed to dwell in this place. But he himself prayed and knew that it was deeper than that it was more than just a building. It was more than just somewhere like, build it and they're going to come. It's more than just that. He said for himself as he dedicated the temple in prayer in the book of 1 Kings, chapter 8, 27 through 30, he says, but will God indeed dwell on the earth? I'm going to repeat that. But will God indeed dwell on the earth? Behold, heaven and the highest heaven cannot contain you. How much less this house that I have built? Yet have regard to the prayer of your servant and to his plea, O Lord my God. Listen to the cry and to the prayer that your servant prays before you this day, that your eyes may be open night and day towards this house. The place which you have said, my name shall be there, that you may listen to the prayer that your servant offers towards this place, and listen to the plea of your servant and your people of Israel when they pray toward this place, and listen in heaven, your dwelling place. And when you hear, forgive. Just listen to his voice. God, will you ever dwell on earth? How much grander is all of this stuff that you have created, the heavens above, that whatever I could do is nothing compared to that. He had to trust in God to know that he was going to bless this place that he is calling him to create. He had to trust in God to know that he was going to do what he said he did, and he was scared. He's like, God, are you really going to do this? Please, Lord, bless this place. Forgive my people. Listen to the prayers that we have for you. Be with us. Please, Lord, be with us, because he knew without him, they have nothing. Without him, if they missed the point, it was not going to end well. Solomon knew that this was not going to be this place, so they trusted in God, but not just in a lip service kind of way, not just in a way that said, oh yeah, I trust you, and then you go and you do something on the side to make sure if it doesn't work out, it's going to be okay. Buy a second one in case this one breaks. He trusted him fully, and he went and he acted. David wanted to make a house for him. He trusted that God was going to use him to further his presence for his people, so he moved from one place to another, and that was enough for him. He trusted when he was told that he wasn't the one that was going to build it, that maybe I'm not supposed to build it. I'm going to trust you, God. When Solomon got the charge that he was supposed to build this grand, wonderful temple, and he's like, I don't think that God will ever really dwell there. Are my people going to get the point of this? He was the wisest man on the planet. And he knew that if God didn't dwell there and his people didn't see it the right way, it was going to be all for nothing. God, please be with us. Be with our people. So let me ask you this. How do we trust God? Do we trust God to set up a home for himself and us the way that he wants to do it? Do we trust in God enough that we are going to allow him to do whatever he wants in our lives? Do we trust God enough to go out and do that one scary thing that we know he's been nogging on us at, and go out and do it regardless of what it's going to mean for our own personal reputation? Do we trust him enough to say, yes, Jesus, you are my everything. I'm going to proclaim this everywhere. I'm going to do whatever you say. I'm going to do it. And walk the walk. Do you trust him enough? Do you trust him like David and Solomon and Moses and Joshua did? Despite adversities that we have probably never even seen before. Despite taking your people out of a country where they were comfortable, even though they were in slavery. Running away from people that were trying to kill them. Going into battle with people that were twice their size. Moving a hallowed temple from its location that it has been for generations to the center of Israel so that it could be more accessible to everyone, to building a giant structure that was going to take so much time and attract attention from nations that you don't want seeing you because they're more powerful than you are. For people that have a tendency, as Solomon knew, to forget who their God was. Do you trust him enough to act? Do you trust him enough to do it properly? And that moves us perfectly into exactly what he said last. Yet the Most High does not dwell in houses made by hands, as the prophet says. Heaven is my throne, and earth is my footstool. What kind of house will you build for me, says the Lord? Or what is the place of my rest? Did not my hands make all these things? Stephen moves in one of the final words that he says literally on earth to remind his people that his God is not going to live in the places that we build for him. He does not dwell in the places made by man. He doesn't. I created the heavens and the earth. I made all this stuff. I created all this already. Why would I need to live in it? Where am I supposed to dwell? What am I supposed to do? Stephen is blowing the lid off of the idea that the temple, that the tabernacle were the end-all, be-all places for God. He's blowing the lid off this idea that the people of Israel, it was all about the temple. It was all about the place. It was all about the physical. It's not words that are going to go over very well to people that have believed and lived this forever. So much so that, well, you know what happens to Stephen at the end of this story. It doesn't end well for him. But I believe that he did what was most important in this entire setting. he did exactly what he was supposed to do. Just as Moses and Joshua and David and Solomon did, he obeyed the word of God. He obeyed the call. He obeyed what he knew he was supposed to do. He obeyed the Lord. So we're supposed to do just that. We must be obedient to the words of God. Just as we are meant to focus on him, as we are meant to trust in him, he's not doing this in a way that's just to go out and say, yes, yeah, okay, it's great, I love it. It's in a way that's going to bring you to action, that's going to change your whole life. What I believe truly defines this is this small phrase, again, one that you would probably miss if you were just reading through it quickly, because I certainly did. And houses made by hands. And houses made by hands. There's a word for this. It's one that's going to be behind me right now. Did it work? Did I get it? Another really crazy word. It's a lot of letters. It's way too many. Chiropoeta. What that means is that in the Greek word, it would have been describing the idols of pagan communities. It could have been describing the things that these guys take for granted. Now, I don't think within this context it's meant to be taken that harshly, but it's just a note of, as some people use this word, it was meant to describe the thing that God hated most, putting something before him. This temple, this place, this physical stuff that you are seeing, it's not all about the place. It's not all about that. It's still all about me. As you look at this place that is made by hands, what do you see? What I think it means is best taken in the context of the reference that Solomon makes, actually, in all of 1 Kings 8:27 and Isaiah 66, 1-2, where he quotes it. I believe that two men say it best. A guy named Howard Marshall, on his commentary in the book of Acts, says, "It is meant to describe humble obedience from his people, rather than the building of an elaborate temple and the offering of sacrifices that are no better than the abominable practices of other people if it is unaccompanied by full obedience." Just as Eckhard Snabel says later on, saying Stephen does not accuse Israel of wrongly worshiping God in the temple. It's not about that. Places made by wood and stone are not inherently evil things. He emphasizes that the people of Israel misunderstand worship as taking place in a man-made structure while failing to see that God has created everything and thus demands full obedience. It's not about the building. We are the church, not this building. You and I are the dwelling places of God, not this house, not that temple, not that tabernacle, not the places where you think that we're supposed to just gather. He cares about you and I. He came down physically in form so that he could meet and be and dwell among us in a place that is accessible to everybody. How hard would it be for us to get from here to Israel, to Jerusalem, real quick and meet with God, and that was the only place to do it? Take a really long time. A lot of us would probably not afford it. A lot of us probably wouldn't want to fly. But how easy is it for you to walk across the street, meet somebody, and talk to them about Jesus? Instant. God wants to dwell within his creation, not the creations you make for him. He says that very plainly, over and over again. It's not about the house. It's not about the stuff. It isn't about that. It's about me. You're missing the point. I'm calling you to focus on me. I'm calling you to trust in me. But more than that, I'm calling you to be obedient to my words, because I don't dwell in the places made by hands. I want to dwell in you. So, what's the point, Jack? I often ask myself that. What's the point? Why do I do all this? Why do I care about all this stuff that you're talking about? Is it just knowledge for knowledge's sake? What's the point? I think the man that is best for the job to explain that to you is the man that started this whole thing off. My friend Levi here. He's going to close us out and explain to us what's the point.
So what I feel like the main point of this all is just being able to just kind of like let all the extra thoughts and emotions that are kind of clouding your mind and making it hard for you to want to go out and trust God and just do what you feel like he's leading you to go and do. So one of my favorite points Jack's made today is that each one of us in here are the church. We are God's temple. And so through that, we should be able to then be the people. We should be able to trust ourselves and trust God to go out and then share. So for me, the main point is being able to use ourselves as the temple and remembering this as we go on our daily lives so that way we can trust God and share through him. So we have one last song. I'm going to ask everybody to stand. Pray. I'm then going to pray, so if you would bow your heads. Lord, thank you for this day and this time to just come and be with you and to be able to have the students come up and just be a little goofy in the beginning and to share a little bit about themselves, Lord. Thank you for this day and just have it be a fruitful day. In your name, amen.